Welcome to Fantastic Vision. Please subscribe us before you watch today's video. The American company NVIDIA is one of the world's leading chip suppliers, and its market share in China accounts for about 1/5 of its revenue. However, affected by the US government's export control policies, NVIDIA is faced with the dilemma of blocked chip exports to China. In order to maintain its market share in China, NVIDIA has launched a compliant version of downgraded chips. These downgraded chips have about 5% less performance than the original versions, but are consistent with the performance density allowed by the US government. However, despite the reduced performance of the downgraded chip, NVIDIA has not lowered its price and sells it for the same price as the original chip. Therefore, according to people familiar with the matter quoted by US media, the purchasing willingness of NVIDIA's major customers in China has dropped significantly, and they have handed over their orders to local chip suppliers in China. The introduction of downgraded chips is a stopgap measure for NVIDIA in the difficult times it faces. The US government's new export restrictions have impacted its billions of dollars in Chinese-related orders, and NVIDIA has previously established long-term, cooperative relationships with relevant Chinese companies. Although the introduction of downgraded chips can meet the requirements of the US government, its performance is significantly worse than the original chips, which makes relevant Chinese companies reduce their consideration of purchasing them. In addition, the tightening of NVIDIA's supply channels also makes it difficult for it to become a qualified supplier. In contrast, choosing Chinese suppliers can better ensure security and is more in line with the long-term development needs of Chinese companies. The US government abuses its export control policies. The US government's abusive export control policies have not only caused trouble for NVIDIA, but also caused chaos in the entire chip supply chain. NVIDIA's supply channels continue to tighten, resulting in it being unable to become a qualified supplier. At the same time, relevant Chinese companies are turning to local chip suppliers out of considerations for long-term development. In response to the US actions, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said on January 8 that the US actions have gone beyond the scope of national security and are actually putting pressure on China's economy. The actions of the United States have deprived emerging countries of their legitimate rights to development and intensified division and confrontation, and related self-interested behaviors will cause the United States to reap the consequences. All countries have the right to ensure national security, and the current approach of the United States has gone beyond setting restrictions on dual-use products, extending the scope of restrictions to civilian consumer-grade products. This approach is committed to a zero-sum game, and is clearly an act of technological warfare. The United States takes 3 actions in the technology war. The US's technological war against China in the chip field mainly includes the following 3 aspects. First, the United States attempts to cut off the connection between China and the United States by implementing decoupling and disconnection in the field of science and technology. At present, the real industrial base of the United States is shrinking, and the areas in which the United States has a neck in China are decreasing day by day. Cutting-edge processed chips and artificial intelligence are a few areas where the United States maintains an advantage. Based on China's national system and more complete industrial system, it is only a matter of time for China to break through the United States' technological barriers. Under the leadership of Chinese companies such as Huawei, Lungsan, CATL, and BYD, China is building a technological highland in the field of cutting-edge technology. Secondly, while trying to promote Sino-US decoupling, the United States continues to use de-risking as an excuse to prevent the development of Chinese companies in mature technology fields. The Biden administration continues to implement the tariffs imposed on China during the Trump administration. Recently, the United States has set its sights on mature chip manufacturing processes in its containment of China. The United States is investigating the import of chips produced by mature Chinese processes by American companies and is trying to reduce purchases from China to prevent Chinese companies from expanding their market share. Third, the United States imposes sanctions indiscriminately. More than 1,300 Chinese companies have been included in the U.S. sanctions list. Through long-arm jurisdiction, we try to artificially block the technological iteration of Chinese technology companies in various fields. In the process of the rise and expansion of influence of Western countries, the technological revolution is the main driving force. The leading position in the field of science and technology is the cornerstone of hegemony for the United States. The fourth scientific and technological revolution is currently brewing and developing. The United States is trying to maintain its leading position through zero-sum game methods and trying to monopolize the factors that triggered the fourth scientific and technological revolution. Admission ticket. Shifting power between China and the United States. In the confrontation and game between China and the United States, China's industrial system is undergoing transformation, and it is increasingly difficult for the United States to stop this process. From Huawei's return to competing with Apple, to the comparison between the Tiangong space station and the soon-to-be decommissioned International Space Station, to the electric vehicles boosting China's overtaking Japan to become the largest automobile exporter, the situation between China and the United States is changing. Changes occur. The high walls of small courtyards built by the United States have increasingly trapped themselves in a cocoon. After being affected by the U.S. government's export control policies, the American company Nvidia chose to launch downgraded chips to maintain its market share in China. However, this choice was not recognized by the relevant Chinese companies, and they handed over the order to local chip suppliers in China. The U.S. government's abusive export control policies have disrupted the chip supply chain and adversely affected the global technology sector. In response to the U.S. actions, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that it went beyond the scope of national security and was an obvious act of technological warfare. In the technological war, the United States has taken 3 actions, including cutting off links, blocking the development of Chinese companies, and imposing indiscriminate sanctions, in an attempt to maintain its leading position in the field of cutting-edge technology. However, as China's industrial system evolves, it becomes increasingly difficult for the United States to stop China's development.